The machines had stopped beeping with hope 3 weeks ago. Now they only counted the seconds of a life the doctors had already written off, and in room 214 of Coastal Mercy Hospital, a decorated Navy SEAL named Jack Donovan lay motionless from the neck down, staring at a ceiling that had become his entire universe. If you believe broken people deserve a second chance, if you believe one voice can reach where medicine cannot, hit like on this video, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Midnight Tale so you never miss a story that reminds us what the human spirit can survive. Jack had survived 6 deployments. He had carried wounded brothers across burning rooftops, swum through freezing black water with a knife between his teeth, and walked into rooms no sane man would enter. But an IED on a routine convoy in his final month of service had done what no enemy fighter ever could. It had taken his legs, his arms, his voice for anything above a whisper, and, according to the 3 specialists who had reviewed his case, his future. The official diagnosis was a severe spinal cord injury with minimal probability of recovery. The unofficial diagnosis, the one nobody said out loud but everyone in that hospital wing believed, was that Jack Donovan had already died the day of the explosion. His body simply hadn't caught up yet. Doctors rotated through his room with clipboards and practiced sympathy, adjusting medications, checking reflexes that never came, and slowly, one by one, they stopped making eye contact when they delivered updates to his family. Hope, in that hospital, had become a professional liability. Nobody wanted to promise what they could not deliver. His wife, Sarah, visited every day for the first 2 months. She held his hand, read him letters from his unit, played old voicemails of him laughing before the world ended for both of them. But grief has a way of hollowing people out slowly, and by week 9, her visits had grown shorter. She still loved him. She simply didn't know how to love a man who could not respond, could not blink twice for yes, could not do anything but exist behind eyes that had gone flat and distant, staring at nothing. It was into this quiet tragedy that a new night nurse named Elena Reyes was assigned to the ICU. She was 34 years old, unremarkable in the way the hospital cared about, meaning she had no medical breakthroughs to her name, no publications, nothing that would make a doctor stop and listen to her opinion. But Elena had something the specialists didn't. She had a brother. Her younger brother, Danny, had served in the same community as Jack, a quiet world of operators who spoke a language built on trust, sacrifice, and identity markers only insiders understood. Danny had died 2 years earlier, not in combat, but in the silence that followed it, a silence so many veterans carry home and never manage to unpack. Elena had watched her brother fade in plain sight while everyone around him insisted he was fine. She had learned too late that the body can go still while the mind is still screaming to be reached. She promised herself she would never again mistake silence for absence. On her 3rd night shift with Jack, long after the family had left and the hallway lights had dimmed to their overnight hush, Elena sat beside his bed doing what the doctors had stopped doing. She talked to him. Not the clinical updates about vitals and medication schedules, but real conversation, the kind you have with someone whose presence you refuse to give up on. She talked about her brother. She talked about the ocean. She talked about honor, about brotherhood, about the particular kind of loneliness that comes from surviving when others didn't. And then, because she had read every page of his file, because she had noticed the faded trident tattoo on his forearm and the unit patches sewn into a folded flag on his windowsill, she leaned in close and said something no doctor, no chart, no clinical protocol would have ever suggested. She whispered his old call sign, the one his teammates had used in the field, the one that belonged only to men who had bled beside him and trusted him with their lives. For 3 full seconds, nothing happened. Then Jack Donovan's eyes moved. It was small, almost imperceptible, a flicker most people would have dismissed as involuntary muscle twitch. But Elena had spent months studying this man's face the way a mother studies her newborns, searching for any sign of the person trapped beneath the stillness. She knew the difference. This was recognition. This was a man clawing his way back from somewhere doctors couldn't map, somewhere no scan could measure, and he had heard her. He had heard the name that meant he was still someone, still a warrior, still Jack. She didn't tell the doctors that night. She was afraid they would explain it away, chalk it up to reflex, add it to a chart that had already decided his story was finished. Instead, she came back the next night, and the night after that, whispering his call sign each time, watching for that same flicker, building what she would later describe as a bridge made entirely of patience and stubborn belief. Slowly, the flicker became a blink. The blink became 2 blinks, deliberate and controlled. Within 3 weeks, Jack Donovan was answering yes and no questions with his eyes, and the medical team that had quietly given up on him was forced to reopen a case file they thought was closed. What followed was not a miracle in the way movies portray them. There was no single moment where Jack leapt from his bed. Recovery was brutal, slow, and humiliating in ways only those who have lived it truly understand. He relearned how to move a single finger before he could hold a cup. He relearned how to form words before he could hold a full conversation. Every inch of progress cost him something, and there were nights Elena sat with him through the frustration and the tears that came when his body refused to cooperate with his will. But he was fighting now. He was present. And presence, for a man doctors had already mourned, was everything. Sarah came back into the room differently after that. She started staying longer again, not out of obligation but because there was someone there to stay for. She watched her husband's eyes track her across the room, watched him mouth her name for the first time in months, and she wept in a way that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with a hope she had been too afraid to hold on to. 8 months after Elena Reyes first whispered a call sign into a silent hospital room, Jack Donovan sat up in a wheelchair for a hospital fundraiser, using an adaptive device to speak through a small speaker attached to his chair. He told the room, filled with doctors who once wrote him off, that medicine had healed his body as much as it could, but a nurse who refused to see him as a lost cause had given him a reason to fight for the rest. He said the doctors had treated his spine. Elena had treated his soul. If this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you that another person's belief can reach further than any diagnosis, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment. It genuinely helps this story find the people who need it most. Before we go, we have one small request. If you have ever been the person who refused to give up on someone, or the person someone refused to give up on, type the words, "still here," in the comments below. We read every single one, and we believe those words matter more than you know. Jack Donovan never returned to full mobility. He never went back to the teams. But he built a foundation for wounded veterans, one that trains nurses and caregivers to look past charts and diagnoses to the person still fighting underneath. He named it, fittingly, the Call Sign Project, because somewhere in a quiet hospital room, a whispered name had reminded him he still had one.